So the alcohol industry is pushing for regulation of the good herb as legalization efforts hit another roadblock. Meanwhile, Virginia could have expanded delivery of herb for medical patients, but the governor vetoed that bill and completely killed it. But let's find out why Big Alcohol is so mad at the good plant.
So there's the beer distributors who absolutely hate cannabis and think it should be immediately banned, particularly the beverages. It's like beer 2.0. It's the fastest growing category in both specs and total wine. It's a giant existential threat to the beer distributors. Chris is subscribed to an industry email newsletter. There was one that they sent out recently, this like long analysis of the industry and how their business is being negatively impacted by consumers choosing healthier alternatives like cannabis and making healthier lifestyle choices like dry January, sober October, these things that are like becoming big cultural trends. Literally talking about how consumers making healthier lifestyle choices is negatively impacting their business.
Hurting their business.
You think maybe you're in the wrong business? That's insane to me.
It's pretty dark.
It's very dark. Very, very dark.
So when you guys think that there are a lot of people against legalization, it's not just big pharma and people like that, but also big alcohol. And that's actually something that we reported on a while back, because Gen Z is actually consuming way less alcohol than previous generations. Now, big alcohol has taken it a step further, and they actually are lobbying to Congress to regulate hemp-derived cannabinoid products. And according to this article, and I quote, alcohol industry representatives descended on Washington, D.C. earlier this month to urge members of Congress to create a federal regulatory framework for intoxicating hemp-derived products such as infused beverages, a market segment that's ballooned since the legalization of hemp in the 2018 Farm Bill. Now, according to this, members of the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, or the WSWA, met with lawmakers and staffers to advocate for three key policy priorities that the group says is based on sound principles of alcohol distribution. And that includes banning synthetic THC, setting up a federal system for testing and labeling products, and also establishing a state-level power to regulate retail sales. Now, the WSWA is urging lawmakers to clarify the rules around hemp-derived cannabinoid products in the next federal farm bill, and they believe that the next federal farm bill should explicitly allow for the production of only naturally derived THC products from hemp, specifically Delta-9. Now, up on screen, you guys can see some of the folks that actually went down to lobby for some of these stuff. These are some of the people that are advocating for the alcohol industry. Now, what I found was pretty interesting, guys. This is probably why big alcohol is so upset. According to this, and I quote, the use of cannabis among consumers is on the rise, and we believe it's being substituted for alcoholic beverages. We also anticipate that increasing U.S. consumer access to recreational herb will be a significant threat to all alcoholic drinks, particularly beer and wine, given their lower price points relative to liquor. So big alcohol clearly sees this as a big threat to them and their bottom line, and I'm talking their profits. And that's probably why they say, and I quote, states should restrict the sale of intoxicating products to businesses licensed to sell beverage alcohol and that are regularly inspected for compliance with laws aimed at preventing sales to individuals under 21. So it seems to me that big alcohol is definitely losing profits, and they're aware of that. And what they want to do is get a piece of the pie. So they want to make sure that some of these beverages are only sold at liquor stores. And we touched on that already. And I know you guys are not in favor of that, but drop it in the comments down below and let me know what you guys think about big alcohol trying to get in on the legalization. Now, speaking of legalization, hopes for legalization took a big hit over in New Hampshire as the House tabled a simple possession bill. Now, we're going to break that down for you guys, but before we do, if you're getting value from this video, please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support us further, join the ICANN VIP Bean Club or just buy us a cup of coffee. Now let's take it over to New Hampshire, because recently they tabled a proposal for simple possession, and their legalization efforts could be facing another roadblock.
In 2022, the state Senate added several former state reps who either supported legalization or didn't reflexively oppose it. But the window that might have opened to get a legalization bill through the upper body at the State House this year appears to be rapidly closing.
Yeah, there's something peculiar that happens to people when they leave the people's house and head over to the other side of the wall.
House Majority Leader Jason Osborne says he's aware of an effort to, quote, kick the can down the road. And legalization advocates say there's been a shift recently as they speak with state senators.
All in the last week or two, there seems to be a bit of a turn of attention from my Republican Senate supporters that this bill now has issues.
House Bill 639 would legalize in New Hampshire for adults 21 and older while imposing a 12.5% tax on sales of the product. State reps backed the legislation with broad bipartisan support. But in recent years, the House's growing enthusiasm for legalization has been blocked by the Senate, where there is bipartisan skepticism of the ability of cannabis to be a revenue driver for the state.
I think the fact that they're promoting it as a revenue producer is nonsense. You know, in New Hampshire, if it's a revenue producer, people usually bite it, jump on it, gravitate to it. But I don't think so in this case.
While no legalization bill has ever reached his desk, Governor Chris Sununu has also been a skeptic, giving senators less of an incentive to act. If HB 639 is rejected by the Senate this week, Majority Leader Osborne indicated to us it won't be without consequence.
It's time we get something done for the people. Stop kicking the can down the road. And there are a lot of Senate bills in the possession of the House right now, and it'd be a shame if anything were to happen to them.
So you guys heard it there for yourselves. There were a number of possession bills that were before them, but they all failed. And that's exactly what happened right here, as this bill also failed. And in this situation, senators over in New Hampshire narrowly voted to table a House-passed bill on Thursday, effectively ending the year's renewed effort to end prohibition in the Live Free or Die state. Now, we mentioned this already, the Live Free or Die state. They got so many regulations when it comes to the plant. Are you really living free, or are you just dying? Now, it's not often that you guys are able to see exactly what goes on in the Senate, especially when it comes to these bills, so just have a look at exactly how this bill got tabled.
The Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred House Bill 198FN, an act relative to legalizing certain quantities of cannabis and establishing penalties for smoking or vaping cannabis in public. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is inexpedient to legislate. Senator Gannon for the committee.
Senator Gannon.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to table.
The motion to lay on the table is non-debatable. Senator Fenton has a question.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam President. If you believe, as I believe, that there is a need for a remedying of the penalties regarding the possession of cannabis in small quantities, and that this bill does not deal with the sale or regulation of cannabis, but rather arresting individuals and inherently targeting certain demographics of people.
For your point of order?
Senator not now be speaking to the legislation and not to the current motion.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, when you issue, and everyone should have gotten your paper here, when you ask for a parliamentary inquiry, it is a request directed to the presiding officer for information or clarification about a parliamentary procedure as it applies to the proceeding. So we're talking about really the motion to table has been made, and we're moving forward that. So your question should be toward the tabling motion, whether or not it's appropriate.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll try and fix it a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
As the number one dad. If I believe possessing something and that we should not be tabling this motion and we should rather encumber our law enforcement officers who are better served focusing on other things, would I now vote no on the tabling motion?
So we had to pause to give you guys a little bit of clarity as to what's going on, right? This bill, House Bill 198, was tabled. As you guys can see on screen, a lot of these bills are debated between a lot of older generation folk, a lot of older school thinking folk who are just not on the legalization train. And that's a big problem right here. There's one person who stood up, Mr. Fenton, to make his position clear. But as far as everyone else is concerned, they don't really care about it.
In New Hampshire, a bill to legalize recreational has failed in the State House. This attempt went further than any prior bill in Concord, but the Granite State remains the only state in New England where marijuana is illegal. The latest bill was a compromise between House and Senate versions, but state reps could not pass it before the session ended. Supporters of the bill argued if passed, New Hampshire would have been the 25th state to legalize, which would have been a tipping point in D.C.
And that's solely down to the fact that they just don't want to do it, because when they do want to pass bills and you do want to push bills through on time, best believe that those bills are being pushed through. And that's exactly what happened right here with a new open cannabis container law which started in New Hampshire. Check it out.
Today in New Hampshire, cannabis must now be stored in its original sealed packaging when it's in your car. If the packaging is open, the product must be stored in the trunk or glove box. The law mirrors open container laws for alcohol and is aimed at reducing drivers from being high behind the wheel. But pro-cannabis advocates say the law moves New Hampshire in the wrong direction.
So New Hampshire has just stuck its head in the sand once again. This new piece of legislation that passed and becomes effective today basically is a method for police to try and poke at folks that drive across the border to Maine, Mass, or Vermont and buy their product.
Cannabis supporters say the Granite State loses upwards of $50 million a year in revenue to those other states. 24 states around the country have legalized recreational. New Hampshire is not one of them.
So states that are slow to legalize are just losing tax dollars to other neighboring states. It's really not rocket science, guys. Now, there was a bill which was proposed in Virginia which will expand eligibility for medical patients to have medical herb delivered to them. And that bill was vetoed by the Virginia governor. Now, what that bill would have done, and I quote, is allow delivery of medical herb directly to patients at locations other than their home. So, for example, you may be able to get your stuff delivered if you're at work or if you're somewhere else, maybe at a friend's spot, but Governor Youngkin in Virginia was not on it. And what he did was recommend an amendment that would remove the language to allow herb to be delivered to places other than a private residence of a medical patient. Now, lawmakers declined to make that change that the governor proposed, and instead they sent that bill as is directly to the governor's desk, and obviously the governor vetoed it and refused to sign it. And that's despite the proposal having strong support in both chambers, passing the Senate on a 30-10 vote and winning final approval in the House on an 84-14 margin. Now, this isn't the first bill that Governor Youngkin actually vetoed. Have a look at one he vetoed about a year ago.
For recreational marijuana use in Virginia will not be happening, at least under Governor Glenn Youngkin's watch. Youngkin vetoed legislation to legalize and establish a recreational market, saying it would endanger Virginians. DC News Now weekend anchor Tosin Fakile joining us now live with more on why the governor said no to the bill. And Tosin, you just spoke to one group of supporters. Were they surprised by the governor's move?
Well, Chris, it wasn't much of a surprise for them, this veto, this group that supports this bill. Governor Youngkin listed several reasons for vetoing retail. One of them, he says, states have seen significant costs associated with retail marijuana that far exceed tax revenue. He also says it doesn't eliminate the illegal black market and doesn't guarantee that the product is safe. Now, you have to remember this bill was sent to Youngkin's desk by the Democrat-controlled Virginia General Assembly. If you remember, in 2021, Virginia legalized, which allowed people 21 and older bikes at dispensaries through the state's medical program. Now, following this veto, they will not be able to buy it for recreational use. The bill would have allowed legal retail sale to start May 2025 and applications for dispensaries in September. In a statement, Governor Youngkin said in part, quote, states following this path have seen adverse effects on children and adolescents' health and safety, increased gang activity, and violent crime. Now, the group that I spoke to that pushes for legalization and framework to benefit people impacted by prohibition says not having a safe and regulated market is what's creating more of a dangerous environment in Virginia.
Not a total surprise, but that does not make our disappointment any less. The list that he gave is a long list of misinformation, to be very honest, and that there is a lot of research that shows that regulated and tested marijuana will create a safer environment for all people, including our youth.
Now, just to note, without 2/3 majority in Virginia's General Assembly, the Democrats cannot override Governor Glenn Youngkin's veto here. Now, Chris, the group that says that they're not in support of this says they're not giving up on this. They say they'll be back next year, and they say they'll be back in 2026 when they believe Virginia will have possibly a new governor.
Now, despite the governor vetoing that bill in 2024, roll around to 2025 and another bill has passed the Senate. Check it out.
Brittany Slaughter shares the details of a bill that just passed the Senate that could have major implications on marijuana.
For the second time, a bill is making its way through the General Assembly. I reached out to his office today, and they tell me the governor plans to once again veto this bill if it hits his desk. Back to you.
So despite the fact that the governor may veto this bill again, at least Virginia is in a better position than other states. Now, the Virginia governor is not the only governor to veto a bill regarding medical herb, as over in Arkansas, the governor also vetoed a bill involving medical herb. Have a look at that and what those patients had to say about it.
Confusion tonight over a veto by Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders on the final day of session. Despite lawmaker approval, the governor shot down a bill that could have made a difference for medical patients patients. 5 News reporter Kayla Davis talked to a cancer patient and a state representative who are questioning now the governor's reasons.
Cindy Moffitt was diagnosed with stage 4 mesothelioma last August. Since then, it's been an uphill battle towards recovery, working to shrink her tumors.
Started on my liver, it spread to my ovaries and my uterus. So I'm on really strong, high doses of chemotherapy.
Because of her illness, she's often isolated.
I'm in and out of the hospital a lot. I have to watch, I'm isolated a lot because of my white blood count. Which keeps me at home and away from people, because if you don't have a good white blood count, you don't have an immune system, which means somebody could sneeze next to me and now I'm in the hospital.
And through her recovery, the medicine that often eases her pain is medical marijuana, but getting that medicine is difficult for her.
I try to make sure that there's not a lot of people in there because of my, immune system. I have handicap tags, but sometimes there's not a spot up front. It's difficult for me to get in and out of cars. Standing for long periods of time is very tiring and hard for me to do.
So when Moffitt heard the bill to allow drive-through pickup was passed in the House and Senate, she was elated. But that didn't last after she found out Governor Sanders vetoed the bill, saying it would expand access for usable marijuana.
How does this make it more accessible for people? Because to make it more accessible to who? The patients that already have cards, that are already getting it, because the public still can't.
Co-sponsor of the bill, Representative Aaron Pilkington, says he agrees with Moffitt.
I'm confused as well because this doesn't increase the number of card holders, and it doesn't increase the amount a card holder can get.
I asked Pilkington if anything can still be done to help handicapped medical patients.
Legislatively, we have two choices. We can either wait till next session and try it again, maybe find ways to make the governor's office happy with it. Second one is we try to override the veto, but I think this chance are really small.
So it seems to me that governors love to veto things that make sense, but don't veto things that don't make sense. Now make that make sense, guys, because to me it makes zero sense. Now we've touched on a lot of things today, so drop it in the comments down below and let me know what you guys think about all those stories. I'm really interested to find out what you guys think. Now there's a recent story going around about politicians and they're panicking, all because of the good plant, and that's causing them to implement bans, and a lot of people are pushing back on these bans. So to find out more about that, and if your state's involved, check this video out because it's coming up right now.